Hello everyone, and welcome back to some more G-Senjou no Maou with me, Phantom Zwei. So, last time we left off, we stood up to Gonzo to help out Usami, Tokita, Shiratori. There's no going back. He just told us that Kyousuke's mother died in an accident. Whether that's something that he just learned of, or he's saying that will be her fate because of what he did, it's kind of unclear. But, let's forge on. Let's see what happens. My dearest son, I went to speak with you in person, his father wrote before the first trial. I'm not going to be able to avoid the death penalty. Thus, I don't rightly care if you take this letter as the rambling excuses of a murderer. I just want to detail the honest truth about the events leading up to my killing of Usami-san. Dun dun dun, right? I was born and raised in a fishing village in Hokkaido, the third son in my family. I moved to Tokyo to pursue higher education, and after graduating from college, I somehow managed to snag a position in the world-famous Sano Corporation. My days in their accounting division was hectic. An extraordinary volume of goods passes through the hands of a huge company, like Sano, each day. They were purchased overseas, imported, manufactured, transported, distributed, and the debits and credits associated with each step required a monstrous effort and nerve-wracking perseverance to keep straight. One day, as I was intensively double-checking our service and purchase costs in preparation for the end of the current billing period, I collapsed from exhaustion. I suppose things finally caught up to me. Nevertheless, it was a happy occasion, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. For that was the day I met your mother, who was working as a nurse at a nearby hospital. I soon found myself making up excuses to my boss, just so that I could sneak out and visit her there. You boys have always known your mother as a cheerful woman whose cooking could satisfy royalty, but at work, she was a bit shy and had a hard time holding conversations. She wasn't very good with people, and trying to socialize with her colleagues wore on her nerves. She later told me that her nursing work aggravated her anxiety so much that she began to take tranquilizers. But as you know, your old man was straightforward, persuasive, and a frivolous joker. I guess I shouldn't be surprised when my son Kyousuke gets described in the same way, huh? I asked her to marry me barely 1 month after meeting her. I rushed things along because I knew how things worked in trading companies. One never stays in one place for too long. Anyway, I took her to an amusement park and gave her the ring at the hotel restaurant that evening. Luckily for me, your mother was also interested in me. Her beautiful white skin turned bright red, and I remember she nearly fell out of her chair in surprise. I went to visit her parents the very next day, and before we knew it, we were married. Supposedly, the people at the ceremony called me a wife-stealer. Soon after, as I'd predicted, I was transferred to Germany. Your mother came along without a single complaint. We had our first child there in Europe, far away from our homeland. That child was you, of course. Apparently, it was a difficult delivery. You came out, legs first. Your old man wept at the sound of your first cry. It was completely out of character. We lived in Germany until you were 3 years old. You were a playful little boy. Your first words were amusement park. Germany had nothing but those mobile carnivals, so when we returned to Japan, I made sure to take you to a full-fledged theme park. I want to play every day, forever. I was quite worried for your future when you said those words. But much to my relief, you turned out to be a genius. They called me to your elementary school once you'd taken an IQ test, and all your mother could say later was that a duck like me had raised up a swan. For a long time, as you know, our family enjoyed peaceful days. My mousy wife, who suddenly became a lioness, went home with her boys, my 2 sons, frivolous Kyousuke and cold, passionate Kyohei. The 4 of us lived happily. Hey, did you ever notice this tidbit? Though it seemed like I was gone overseas on business most of the time, I was always home for Bon, New Year's, and your birthday. Now that I think about it, those were the happiest days of my life. So, when was it that I met Usami Yoshinori, rather? Usami-san was a capable man, working as a sales manager at a construction firm under the Sano Corporation umbrella. You've heard the Tomenbetsu City Outer Underground Discharge Channel, right? It's being constructed under the city as a large drainage route for rainwater. If it ever gets completed, they say it'll be 50 meters deep and one of the largest underground open spaces in the world. At the first time I met Usami-san, he boasted about how he had plucked the privilege of building the outer underground discharge channel from the whole country. He held his head high like a samurai and talked in a dignified manner. I met the man when I was transferred to that huge nationally recognized project. I say the first time I met him, but I suppose that's a lie. I first encountered him back in my school days, through an activist group we both attended. Activism was all the rage back in those days. It may sound hard to believe now, but I was bad news back then. I took over an authoritative position in an activist group from a neighboring town. This position allowed me to manage their funds. It was some fairly risky business. And to this very day, I still have police coming to my door from time to time. Usami-san and I had a riot discussing old times. For example, there was a time we barricaded ourselves in one of the school buildings. But as we look back on everything, both Usami-san and I realized that we hadn't done what we did out of any productive ideals or anything. There was merely something wrong with us. At least, that's the conclusion we both reached as we sat around drinking together. After about 2 weeks, we had gotten close enough that Usami-san invited me over to his house. Much to my surprise, it wasn't a house at all. It was a small apartment that seemed to be at least 20 years old. I suppose I expected him to live more luxuriously, seeing as how he had such a distinguished career. I do have quite a bit of savings, but I don't come home very often. He laughed as he said that. I found that rather strange. I had heard that he had a wife and daughter. However, I understood when he told me his wife's name. I was astonished, and I must admit, even a bit jealous. His wife was Mishima Kaoru, a famous violinist. He said he had waited to tell me so that it would come as a bigger surprise. He'd always had the nature of an entertainer and enjoyed his dramatics more than most. I'm sure I've told you before, but I'm a huge fan of Mishima-san. Her world tours brought her performances to audiences around the globe, from Moscow to New York. She must have been incredibly busy. It's only natural she wouldn't have time to go home. It made me feel incredibly sorry for her daughter, Haru. Her father was as wildly successful as her mother, and between all the transfers and travel, the poor girl must have been left behind more often than not. I doubt she received the love and attention she needed to develop as a child should. The general consensus about little Haru-chan was that she was a strange kid, and sure enough, when I knocked on the door to her room, that fateful first visit, she didn't respond at all. No greeting, no acknowledgement. Only the sound of a violin betrayed her presence within. "This song is for you," she eventually said, and began playing Air on the G string. Apparently, she was rather like you. She was born in Germany, and had learned to play the violin from the age of 5. She had her mother's talent, and the girl's rendition was truly beautiful. At that point, you could say Usami-san and I were friends. Nevertheless, Haru-chan kept to herself all the time. It made me want to bring her home to meet you and your brother. God knows the girl probably never had been to a proper family gathering. However, I was never given the chance. The more I was with Usami-san, the more he invited me to play mahjong. One day, as he was kicking my ass at the game, Usami-san cheerily told me about his family situation, that he was the 4th son in a family of bureaucrats, that despite having the brains and connections to be a politician, he continued to work at his current company. It was only when he began to insult his father, who was a famous member of the cabinet, and his brothers that I realized something was not quite right. And I assure you, it wasn't a side effect of my many losses at mahjong. I later found out that his family had disowned him, but he certainly wasn't a worthless man. He was a good leader to his subordinates, and on the Underground Channel project, and he took initiative when negotiating with subcontractors. He practically became a corporate legend after heading alone into the director of senior management's office, a man named Somiya, with a bottle of whiskey to propose an increase in the project's budget. Usami was a man of both humor and wit, and to be quite honest, it's not surprising to me that he was able to win over Mishima Kaoru. "Samejima-san, I've got a favor to ask," he said in his usual dramatic tone one night, after we finished a dinner meeting at a high-class restaurant in downtown Tokyo. "I believe you'll find it to be quite a tempting offer." He said he wanted to start his own business in the near future. Not one under the Sano Corporation umbrella, but his very own company. "You're the first person I've mentioned this to," he said as passionately as a child. He had a tendency to boast about his plans, but his talent was recognized both within the company and around Japan's business world. I was sure he'd be a success, and I told him that I was rooting for him. "I want you to be my partner." I'd half suspected the conversation was headed in that direction, but he openly invited me to join his new company. He respectfully bowed to me and offered to make me a manager if I invested some money in the company. I felt bad about it, but I rejected his offer. I didn't have any ambition. I was happy with my current job, and most of all, if I had time to start a business, I'd rather spend it with you and the rest of our family. "I'm sad to hear that," Usami-san said. "I'm sorry. I've got a baby girl on the way, you see." "Really now, congratulations. You've always said you wanted a girl. Have you decided on a name yet?" "The child I named Kiyomi was born with a genetic heart disease, as the two of you know. It was the first baby girl in our home, which had until then only been blessed with boys. My excitement was probably enough to make you two jealous. And she was a handful, wasn't she? We had to take her to the hospital twice a week, and your mother nearly collapsed from anemia. And when your mother was feeling too ill to change your noisy little sister's diapers, you diligently offered to do it, or rather volunteered to do it yourself. You were such a kind-hearted boy. Nevertheless, Kiyomi died. She was only 15 months old. She passed on a peaceful day, one heavy with the traces of the coming spring. Your mother said she looked like she was sleeping. Do you remember the quiet funeral, son? It was only the four of us, yet you didn't shed a single tear. For what reason was she born? You shouted up at the clear winter sky. You were just a boy, but life had already driven you to curse God. A week or so after Kiyomi died, Usami-san came to me with 3 of his subordinates. They were clad in mourning clothes and suddenly bowed to me. I'm very sorry for your loss, he said, choking back tears. Usami-san raised his head and didn't try to hide the overflowing tears pouring from his red eyes. He's crying for Kiyomi, I thought, naively moved. After all, he had given clothes to my baby girl when she was born. I completely dropped my guard around Usami-san. He made time to take me to an expensive restaurant in Ginza once. The wife stole off to Berlin and took Haru with her. I'm feeling pretty lonely myself. He said, and I completely believed that the man, smiling bashfully before me, was a true friend. How much do you need? What do you mean? You talked to me about investing before, remember? You needed funds to start your own business. If you want my help, it's yours. Oh, don't be silly. I can't do that, Samejima-san. You've got a family to take care of. You can't have time to be answering my whims. You're right. I'm sorry, but I can't leave my current job to go with you. Still, I'd like to lend you something as a token of my gratitude. I put aside 5 million yen for Kiyomi's medical bills. So at the time, I figured it wouldn't do any harm to invest in a friend who cared about Kiyomi enough to shed tears. I had already saved enough money to put 2 boys through schooling, and with my high-paying job in at a top-class company, I had also probably forgotten the value of 5 million yen. Thank you very much. I'll repay this debt many times over. Thinking back on it now, I realized that Kiyomi's death had clouded my judgment. I made a few small blunders at work, and occasionally took out my frustration on your mother. So after offering a stick of incense to Kiyomi's portrait, I signed Usami-san's investment contracts. My signature was only needed on one of 2 papers. We had the contracts notarized the next day. It's only now that I question why I needed to sign something in order to invest in his company. I've lamented this oversight so many times since that day. Why did I not read the other of the two papers? How could an accountant of the Sano Corporation fall for such a simple ploy? I'll be asked these questions at my trial, I'm sure of it. They'll grind this point into the dust, doubting my sensibility, my common sense, and even my sanity. Forgive your foolish old dad. After that day, Usami-san almost never met with me for a meal. I brushed it off, thinking he was just busy between building the outer underground discharge channel and setting up his own business. But then one weekend, when we were preparing to go on a family camping trip, a huge man in a jet black suit and blood-red shirt showed up on our doorstep. I met a few radicals during my stint in school activism. They all had uncanny facial expressions, and their eyes glistened with their deviant ideals. Not one of those twisted men had half the overwhelming atmosphere of this bestial man. 50 million in all. He spoke in a tone that said that he wouldn't take no for an answer, and I trembled in fear. It wasn't hard to recognize that giant as a Yakuza debt collector. He held a promissory note up to my face. I couldn't believe it. I had apparently at some point become the guarantor of someone named Kato Takeyuki. I knew the name. He was one of Usami-san's subordinates, and I'd played mahjong with him a few times. I had no idea what was what, and I asked him to leave. He obeyed me that day. However, his frozen eyes told me that next time he wouldn't be so lenient. I can still see the worry in your mother's eyes that afternoon. I was taken aback when I looked at the promissory note. The loan had a principal of 5 million yen, but an unbelievable amount of interest had accrued. As the man had said, 50 million in all. Promissory note in hand, I drove over to Usami-san's apartment. Mishima-san and Haru-chan weren't there. In their places were 3 men, including Kato Takeyuki and Usami-san playing mahjong without a care in the world. I never intended to trick you, Samejima-san. I said I'd invest 5 million in you. I didn't say I'd shoulder your 50 million yen in debts. But you did sign the promissory note, did you not? Usami-san's acting was stellar. He tilted his head, as if to say I was acting strange. If at this point I'd realized the trick Usami-san used on the promissory note, I wouldn't have had to resort to murder. I'm still not quite sure as to what happened, but Usami-san had somehow hidden something within those two contracts that exploded into my 50 million yen debt to the devil. Anyway, 50 million. You can pay it for my subordinate, Kato, yes? It's not like it's an unpayable sum for someone in a top-rate firm like yourself, his arrogant chin seemed to say. Isn't this a crime, Usami-san? Don't be so silly. Where's the proof of that? This is fraud. I'll report you to the police. That's fine with me. If you do that, I'll just go ahead and report all of your recent screw-ups to Samiya back at headquarters. At this point, there wasn't a single employee in the company who was not aware of the close friendship between Usami-san and Director Somiya. I myself had heard rumors about employees being fired the day after doing no more than glaring at Usami-san, and foolish as it was, I believed them. But if I were indeed a criminal, Samejima-san, I'd be in good company. Remember when we entertained that fellow from the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, and Transport in that restaurant in Alaska, along with his female companion? I'd say that was a fine example of excessive reception. Now remind me, who headed up that little event? Deftly rolling the mahjong tile in his fingertips, he spoke triumphantly. You were sure enjoying yourself that night, he continued, prompting one of his subordinates to laugh. You were drooling all over that woman, despite being a married man. The laughs spread through the room. The talk about starting your own business was a lie then? I asked in desperation. No, it was true, but it's something I'll put more thought into later. At the moment, I'm devoted to finishing the outer underground discharge channel. I thought of Kiyomi, who died without living even a fraction of a full life. Those tears were fake too, weren't they? I will curse Usami's false sobs, even from the very platform of the gallows. Could you please leave? I have a winning hand here. I spoke with the corporate lawyer at Sano about how a friend had frauded me, but in the end, he said I had no choice but to pay up. Even after taking out all of my savings, I still couldn't reach 50 million. I'm not much of an extravagant spender, but your sickly mother's medical expenses and Kiyomi's operation bills weren't cheap, and they really took a toll on our family finances. Sucking up to my parents, being scorned by my relatives' cold eyes, planted a dark emotion in my very soul. Why am I in this situation? I bottled my anger at the unfair circumstances as I prostrated myself daily before a collector by the name of Azai Gonzo. I've paid off 20 million now, Usami-san. Please take care of the rest. I confronted Usami-san in broad daylight as he gave a presentation at the company. Usami-san, surrounded by corporate executives, wasn't fazed in the slightest. Could you pick a better place for this? Why should I cover for your debts? The cheek! I lost myself in anger, and the next thing I remember, I was grabbing him by the collar. That, naturally, was exactly what he planned for me to do. No one in the company would listen to me after that act of violence. All that awaited me was a week-long suspension and a cut in my salary. With nothing to do but cry myself to sleep, I returned home and knelt in front of Kiyomi's portrait every day. I trembled in anger day in, day out. Anger towards Usami, anger towards my foolishness. My nerves were so on edge, I'd begun to believe that Usami killed Kiyomi himself. My lawyer says that my unsound mind at the time would help in an insanity plea. Months passed, and I still had no means with which to repay the debt. Meanwhile, Usami's effort finally paid off, and he was promoted to senior executive manager. He headed the outer underground discharge channel project, which boasts about being the largest underground structure ever built. In front of that, my existence must have been trivial to him. Well, son, should I have forgiven this man? I feel bad for you three, my family. But Usami cried fake tears at Kiyomi's death and laughed inside his heart. You cried out to the heavens at how unfair Kiyomi's death was. For what reason was she born? You said. Was Kiyomi born into this world to be used by Usami? Of course not, right? Just before I committed the act, I was called out by Usami. Usami, ever the man of pleasure, was addicted to gambling on illegal horse races. At first glance, the place looked like a regular coffee shop. But the kind of people who gathered there weren't there to drink coffee. They were all dressed too shabbily to be the typical posh clientele of such a place. They all stared at the television screen, watching the races with an excited air about them. Keep this a secret from my wife and daughter, he said cheerfully, and I was at a loss for words. Looks like you're having some money troubles. Whose fault do you think that is? I wanted to shout. Do you know about the Soniyama Group? It was a Yakuza organization, operating out of Tomanbetsu City. If you work in construction for a while, you can get connections with these kind of people. You're as overdramatic as ever. What are you talking about? I have a favor to ask of you. To make the story short, he wanted to embezzle from Seno, and he wanted the cooperation of the lead accountant, me. He said we could give the Yakuza a cut as well. How about it? If you accept my offer, I might ask them to ease up on collecting your debt. A cruel smile formed on his thin lips. It was only then that I truly understood the events of the past few months. This man had been trying to trick me from the very start. Getting my signature on that accursed contract was only the beginning. Usami-san, do you have no concept of decency? Usami just laughed out of his nose. Samejima Toshikatsu. Your name itself is a testament to your destiny to lose at everything you do. Toshikatsu is victory spelled backwards. Defeat. And Samejima, that admiral who lost Japan the war? No one would heed mortality lessons who preached by such a profound loser, or morality, rather. We're not in college anymore. As an adult, I'm questioning whether you have any sort of moral values. You aren't fighting a war, you're just bullying the weak. You have a daughter too, don't you? How would you feel if what happened to your daughter my daughter happened to Haru, rather? You say it like I killed Kiyomi-chan or something. How cruel. My subordinates and I even went to the trouble of going to pay our respects. That must have been the moment where my passing fancies of killing him became more than just fancies. In any case, didn't you and your wife consider your age? It's common knowledge that having children at an old age carries danger with it. Usami was clever. His mind had tapped somehow into the powers of hell. He really hit me where it hurt, my sin. When the doctors told me about the abnormality in Kiyomi's heart, I was plagued with guilt. The only child I've made is Haru. Unlike your children, Haru is a brilliant daughter. She has my genes, after all. So she's a demon spawn. No, she's an angel, naturally. What father would think otherwise about his child? I know that the girl Haru, with her tiny violin, wasn't at fault for anything. But hatred burned in my heart, and I felt the only way to strike at this beast in human clothes would be to kill his daughter. Air on the G-string danced in my head. Men's minds are strange things, as they correlate sensations like music to memories and emotion. Thus, Air on the G-string became the soundtrack to my revenge against Usami. Son, what will your mind's eye paint in your heart when you listen to Air on the G-string? That was a really long narration. But now, at long last, we have some glimpse into what happened truly to Kyousuke's father, as to all the illusions he's made up until this point. And we learned some very interesting tidbits. That Kyousuke wasn't an only child. He had a brother, he had a sister. We learned that Usami is, the name of the man who Kyousuke's father killed. Clearly, Usami Haru's father. So, that connection between them. It's hard to believe this magical scenery was made by the hands of man. The Tomenbetsu City outer underground discharge channel. It's also called the Underground Shrine, a giant supercharged cistern. It collects the rainwater that drains into it through an underground tunnel network, then opens up into a nearby river. Water is the source of life, but can sometimes cause terrible disasters. It was fear, the fear of flooding, that brought the people together who constructed this. They pooled their intelligence to make this disaster prevention facility. It was also Usami Yoshinori's lifelong desire. Father, soon, I swear, soon, I too will hear air. The G-string of the celestial violin will be passed down from one generation to the next. I'll save you, Father. Soon. I went to the police forensics lab. It was a tiny, cramped room. One corpse lay strewn out. The glossy white sheet stood out among the dull, dim darkness. Yes, it was definitely my mother. I somehow managed to squeak that the thing before me, with the strangely disfigured head and body, was indeed Mom. The policeman sighed and then said, "Now we can finally do an autopsy." My beautiful mother. The woman who hugged me tightly as I shook from the cold. The woman who gave her body and soul to protect me from that monstrous man. Her head was caved in. Yet it was definitely Mom. Despite recuperating at home after a diagnosis of severe clinical depression, she apparently suddenly gathered her things and dashed outside at 7 p.m. the day of the accident. They found a plane ticket to Tokyo's Haneda airport on her person. It seems she planned to take the red-eye to Tokyo. The accident occurred as she tried to get on the bus to the airport and cross the intersection. Apparently, the crosswalk light was green. Nevertheless, a car smashed into her at 75 miles per hour. The driver, a young man, tried to get away, but a nearby patrol car chased and ultimately apprehended him. A quick inspection revealed that he had been drinking. I wonder how Usami and Tokita fared in their own escape. What punishment awaits me now that I've betrayed Gonzo? I just don't care anymore. One of the items found among my mother's belongings was a handmade scarf. I clutch it tightly as I stare at the floor of my dark, lonely room. Someone, Please answer just one question. What sin did my mother commit to lead her to death? She'd planned to come surprise me with a visit. I should have gone to Sapporo to pick her up. Years ago. I should have gone to live with her, even if it meant leaving Gonzo's side. Yet I continued to follow Gonzo, determined to make a name for myself in the underworld. What a childish dream. Wasn't my goal all along to take care of my ailing mother? I treated it as my one and only shining, albeit tiny hope. Poor Mom. Her husband was a murderer. She was so deep in debt that she fell mentally ill. And to top it all off, she died in an unfair, untimely death by vehicular manslaughter. Where is the justice in this goddamn world? Angels do not exist. How could they? If they did, I would have a firmer grip on my sanity. I wouldn't be grasping at my burning hatred to protect my humanity. The only things keeping me from losing my mind are the finely detailed visions of myself killing the driver who murdered my mother. A headache of tears at my skull. But right now, I almost feel blessed with the pain, this pleasure, this punishment, this retribution from God upon a pathetic boy who couldn't save his mother. I vaguely see a light at the end of the tunnel. I might be able to reach it if I lend myself to this headache. I couldn't hold back my laughter. I felt refreshed, as if the seeds I'd planted that failed to sprout had actually only waited for the opportune moment and were now reaching for the sun. Maou, huh? I think back on all the incomprehensible events of this past winter. The ransom stolen from Tsubaki's family. The attempt on Azai Gonzo's life via car bombing. Thinking about it now, there was something I didn't like about Tsubaki, and it was Gonzo that kept me from seeing my mother. I had plenty enough motives, and zero alibis actually. All of the action occurred while I wasn't feeling well. My memory of those events is too hazy to interpret. Oh yes, and let's not forget Dr. Akimoto's enthusiastic, romantic diagnosis. The suspicious looks from Usami and Gonzo. I thought it was impossible before, but now I want to believe it. No, I'm ready to believe it. After all, what's truly impossible? Surely it was impossible for my mother to be killed in an accident. Preposterous things happen every goddamn day. So, maybe I really am Maou. The echo of the intercom's chime suddenly rings throughout the room. I thought it was one of Gonzo's cronies, but it was an unexpected person. It was Usami, still on the run from the Sowa Alliance. I let Usami in. She was aghast at the change in me. After all, I haven't bathed in several days. Oh, okay, it's been a bit of time apparently. This isn't exactly the best place to hide from the Yakuza. But what? My heart throbs in pain. I'd always held a certain suspicion towards Usami. It was related to the events surrounding my biological father, events I never cared to talk about. What do you care if my mother is dead? She mumbled. She seems to be pitying me. I decided to ask on a whim. Are you Usami Yoshinori's daughter? She stopped breathing. I see. I almost wanted to laugh. That's why you've been following me around all this time. Did you want to apologize in your father's stead? Or did you come to avenge his murder? Usami's sobs drizzled out into the room, and their echoes diffused through the darkness. It was unpleasant. Why are you crying? Disgusting to the bitter end. Shut up! But Usami didn't even try to wipe away her tears. What?
今ユキと水葉はユキの自宅にいます。警察の感謝です。
I see. That sounds like a reasonable enough plan. I guess that's why Gonzo hasn't made his move yet. But that still doesn't explain why you're here.
ですから浅井さんに会いたくなって。
You wanted to see me? Why would you want to see a murderer's son? Usami's always been a strange woman. I hear the sound of ruffling clothing. The victim's daughter suddenly started taking her clothes off.
私でよければ。
Oh, the beast's daughter is a prostitute.
好きです。
It felt like someone had squeezed my heart.
ずっと好きだったよ。
That was the worst confession ever. Hilarious. What was happening in my room was far off from an expression of pure love. It was little more than an insult. An insult that defiled me and disgraced her. It was only right that she shook all over. You've always loved me, you say? I have half a mind to kill you on the spot, you know that? There's no way we could ever be together! Do you even know what your father did to mine, huh? Say it!
でもそれは私たちには関係ないはず。
Yeah, sure. Logically, you're right. If I were a fucking machine, then we could do whatever you want. But how do you expect me to fucking look you in the eye and accept you while I think about the humiliation my father went through?
私はそれでもあなたが。
Usami looked like she was about to fall to her knees crying. Nevertheless, she diligently held her reddened eyes fixed on me. She seemed to be devoting all of her all to this confrontation.
好きです。ダメだ忘れようって思ってもずっと好きでした。
I can see that her feelings are true.
許してください。どうかあなたを好きでいても。
The woman in front of me was an Usami I didn't know. A woman hopelessly in love.
初めて会った10年前から私はあなただけを思ってあなただけが忘れられなくて。
10 years ago, I think back. I see a hazy scene, one I don't remember very well. It came as a flash, tearing through the darkness of my memory, like a faint twinkle of lightning. But it left as quickly as it came, and the abyss of hatred was quick to cover my world once again. I see. So you came to comfort me?
すみません。浅井さんは同情なんて大嫌いだと思いましたが、それでも何か力になれればと。
Because?
はい。好きだからです。
How pushy. Pretty damn unsightly, if you ask me. In what way is this girl a hero? She's a goddamn demon spawn. Alright. Take your clothes off.
はい。
Unfortunately, despite the, drama here, I'm probably gonna have to cut this. I don't remember, exactly what happens here, but if I do, then I'll summarize what happens when she's decent again. So she took her clothes off, and Kyousuke was getting ready, and then Usami sobbed out Kiyomi-chan. Not really for her full name, but, like Mi-chan. And he was like, how dare she say that name? Get out of my sight, Usami! Her reaction was just to cry like a child. This is my very last sliver of goodwill towards you. Next time I see you, I'll do more than rape you. She trembled as she hurriedly dressed. I don't ever want to see your face again. Next time, I'll kill her without a second thought. I'm barely able to hold back my urge to torture her to death as it is. However, Usami said my dead sister's name. She said, "Kiyomi-chan, I'm sorry," and truly put all of her heart into the apology. Usami dashes into the room's darkness, tumbles around a bit, and leaves in a run. Absolute silence reigns after her departure. My ears ring, and my heartache threatens to break my will. And right at this very moment, I can feel Maou awakening inside me. Now, what a refreshing morning. Exactly 1 week has passed since Tokida's hostage case. At the moment, I'm wondering what I should do now. I hear something at the door. The door opens. Several feet and shod in expensive leather, send sharp noises through the room. Why, hello there, Horibe-san. I casually greet the few Yakuza who have clearly come for my blood. Oh no, don't worry about it. What business do you have with me? A cruel smile surfaced on Horibe's face. Oh, has he told you to kill me? Do you agree with him? What do you mean? Oh, that? You know how crowded it was. There was nothing I could do. I was desperately trying to contact you too. He spoke gleefully. I grinned. Ah, so Mia-san, huh? The corners of Horibe's mouth twisted as well, as if responding to me. Dunno. I don't remember. The next moment, I was staring down a gun barrel. He pressed me for an answer. He intends to kill me on the spot. Apology? He's completely right. Thanks to Gonzo adopting me, my life has been hell. How do I get out of this one? There are 3 other burly men here to back Horibe up. They've got the only door blocked off. Jumping out the window wouldn't be such a good idea. This is the 16th floor, which leaves... nothing. Of course not. Only a fool would use violence against professional employers of violence. Still, these are nothing more than Gonzo's dogs. Livestock. Slaves to money. I stare down Horibe as he points his gun at me. Did he come here dead set on killing me? Or is there some room for negotiation? Does he really intend on pulling the trigger? Or is it just a threat? Alright. Well, Horibe-san, let me ask just one thing. Horibe narrows his eyes. Did Father just order you to kill me? Father. While keeping my eyes on the barrel of the gun, I point to my safe. Contained within is the money I was saving to pay off my father's debt and provide for my mother's future. The small fortune is worth no more to me now than old scraps of paper.
中身の現生も回収させてもらいますよ。
As I expected, the slave to money took the bait. Oh, you will? That's rather troubling. There's over 50 million in there, you see.
じゃあそれを開けてもらいましょうか。
Haribe waved the gun in the direction of the safe, as if he were sure of his victory. Very well. I walked to the safe, slowly dialed the combination, and opened the door. They must have been dazzled by the glow of the gold inside.
いやいや、坊ちゃんはなかなか交渉上手ですね。
Thank you. I turned around to face Haribe and his joyous smile. The man looked like a child about to torture a bug.
で、そいつでこの場を見逃してもらおうっていうハロですよ。
Indeed. How about it?
ダメですわ。
Haribe's face closed in on mine. His anger so intense that it made his blood vessels protrude from his head.
本当に憎たらしいことだな。往生際が悪いんだよ、このガキは。
Looking at him up close emphasizes how frightening this man truly is. Did I really once command this bunch? I decided to speak up and end this charade. I see. I wholeheartedly apologize for my rudeness. However, this is my win.
なんだと?
You made me open the safe at gunpoint. Do you understand what this means? If you had just shot and killed me earlier, it had been simple murder. But killing me after making me open my safe is murder with intent to rob, whether you take the money or not. Haribe's clean-shaven eyebrows jumped up. Understood? You know what happens to people in your situation, a life sentence. Or if you're unlucky, the death penalty. Haribe's glance slowly dropped to the ground. You're a genuine Yakuza, right, Haribe? Being put in jail for murder for your boss's sake is no big deal. But if you dishonor yourself with the title of a thief, even if you get out of jail, there will be no place in the Suwa Alliance for you. Now, think hard. Will you throw your life away for a kid like me? A calculating man like Haribe should know what to do.
こりゃ一本取られましたね。
It'd have been a different situation if this were deep in the mountains in the middle of nowhere, and someone other than Haribe was pointing a gun at me. How about this? By the time you got here, I was already gone. Haribe clicked his tongue and put on his usual Yakuza smile. Excuse me. Lots of talking this episode.
わかりました。
I'm in your debt.
で、坊ちゃん。
The last thing he said was exactly what I'd expect of Haribe.
この5000のうちいかほど包んでもらえるんですかね。
This will be the last time we meet. I received a call as I was out walking. Yo, Tsubaki, what's up?
なんか久しぶりだね。元気かな?
I decided to remind you that I exist. Yeah, I feel great.
学園来ないのかな?
School, huh? Now that's nostalgic.
はるちゃんもみつはちゃんもゆきさんも来てなくて。
Oh? Maybe it's the cold weather getting to everybody.
何かあったの?
Who knows? I don't anyway. I've been busy with work, or should I say play.
まあ元気ならいいや。そのうち学園にも来てね。
I suppose that means the call is drawing to a close. Wait, Tsubaki.
どうしたの?
How's your family doing? Are you getting along all right?
何の変わりもないよ。
I'm so sorry about that thing last year.
何が? 浅井くんはよくしてくれたじゃない。
Never mind. Don't worry about it. Later. Tsubaki cheerfully said bye-bye before hanging up. One big happy family, huh? Having a family is enough happiness on its own. There's no need to complicate that. You can always make more money. Now, what to do? All right. I should probably deal with Azai Gonzo. He should probably just have died from that car bomb. All right. Let's go kill him. But before that, there's still one thing that's bothering me. That memory. It's the only thing holding me back. Usami said she met me 10 years ago. Was that memory? Was it on the rooftop of the Sano Corporation's headquarters? Did I really meet Usami as a kid? I need to find out. Revenge can wait for now. I head for the Sano Corporation building. The night wears on, and now it's time to act. I finish my preparations and leave Sano's headquarters even. Samejima Toshikatsu and Usami Haru met as children. They socialized in their own clumsy way and formed a friendship completely ignorant of what was transpiring between their parents. What a hilarious story. An old friend holding an unrequited love for an outrageous amount of time. And then a 10-year reunion. Your love could never have been answered, Usami. For you to seek normal happiness like that is impertinent. Now, Father doesn't have much time left. There's one man I must kill before executing my final plan. I take my cell phone in hand to call him. I throw my personal feelings to the wind as I listen to the ringing of the line. Be thankful I let you live for so long. The call connects, and I speak up. It's been a while. Do you think that kind of greeting is suitable for this situation? Haru Vision. Oh, but before we hop into this scene, actually, I think it's a really good place to end the episode, because things are only gonna keep getting more intense from here. Because the game has a fantastic climax, as you're probably understanding already. But anyway, as always, thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.